On Saturday afternoon, hundreds of thousands of people came out. I saw a number, maybe 400,000, but
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands for sure, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and upheld U.S. aid to Israel. It was part of a global day of protests that saw similar pro-Palestinian marches in cities that included London, Rome, Paris, Dublin, Johannesburg, and even in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. It was organized here locally in the D.C. area by the American Muslim Task Force for Palestine and other groups as well. And now the Saturday's protest comes after just a day after Israel rejected allegations brought by South Africa at the International Court of Justice. Did you watch any of those hearings, Nadia?
Well, it was only streaming on Al Jazeera from what
Yeah,
I could
that's right.
see.
Did you see it?
Um,
A
a
lot of
little.
people were talking about it online. How no Western news outlet carried South Africa's presentation, but a lot of them carried live. But a lot of them carried Israel's
Yeah,
presentation live. Yeah.
that's typical of what we've seen in the last 100 days is really, kind of sharing whether it's like the lived experiences of Israeli family, the hostages that were taken. Um, we're seeing very little around like the lived experiences of Palestinian folks or Gazan folks.
On
So I
mainstream
was not
mainstream
on
news,
mainstream
yeah, for
media,
sure.
yeah, and so yeah, I guess I'm not surprised that it was that the uh the sorry, the hearings, is that what we're calling them? The
Yeah.
hearings? That the hearings were not broadcasted on mainstream media like, be the BBC or, um, any of the American kind of, broadcasts, stations, including, like, NPR and PBS, like, didn't really see much,
Yeah.
around that as well, so yeah, not
Yeah, for me,
surprised.
yeah, I saw a lot of it on social media and, most of it, afterwards. Information on both sides, and, I thought that South Africa made a strong case, and, honestly, I think Israel has made a strong rebuttal as well based on their interpretation of the law. It's,
Sure.
it'll be interesting to see what happens, but going back to the protest, and the other thing about it now that it's happened on MLK weekend,
Mhm.
MLK Day weekend, which I thought was really, a nice touch for the organizers. We have a quote here in the article that says from Mohammed Habi, the director of development for the American Muslims for Palestine, who was one of the lead organizers of the event. He said, and I quote, "We feel that it is important for us to come on this holiday weekend in the spirit of MLK when he said that, quote, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, that we stand up against the injustice that's going on in Gaza right now and stand up against the atrocities that are being supported and promoted by our government." Now, what did you think about the meaning of it happening over this weekend?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of, conversation around the fact that it was over this holiday. I think it was, it might have been intentional, but I think it was great to have it because we know in America at least what MLK stands for, and what that holiday stands for in particular. Um, I I did struggle though. I saw a lot of MLK quotes that were pertaining to one, the same quote that we see every year, which is "I have a dream."
Yes.
Um, and then I saw a lot of, quotes that were kind of, not necessarily advocating for the humanitarian efforts that are being done, across, Gaza or Palestine. Um, I did read a really cool article, and I forwarded to you, but I don't know if you took a moment to read it. I sent it kind of right before this, but it was a really great Washington Post article. The sermons where MLK spoke candidly on the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Mm,
MLK did have a lot had some stuff to say around the Arab-Israeli conflict when he was alive, as did Malcolm X. And I just thought that article was really interesting as you talked about as they kinda laid out, when he visited the Holy Land and why he didn't go back the second time around, and I would really encourage folks to read that if they really wanted to get an understanding of kind of his perspective, his take on, that area
Yeah,
in the Middle East.
I think that there's no doubt that he would be calling for a ceasefire, probably on day 1, but, yeah, certainly by
And some
now,
might argue that. That some may
Yeah,
argue
you think
that.
so?
Some
Yeah,
I've heard some people arguing
oh,
that
okay, well, maybe I'm wrong,
it's
maybe I don't know MLK as well as others, but yeah, I can't imagine someone like him would be advocating for
yeah,
this kind of death and destruction and despair
yeah,
to people that are, some of the most victimized, in the world, at least, in the last couple decades, let alone last month. But,
yeah,
now that
sure.
Cornel West was there, let's pull up
Yeah.
this story and listen to some sound from him at the Global Day of Action for Gaza.
But when I talk about, and one of these days it's going to happen, I may not live to see it for myself, but I know I would have done all that I could to bear witness with every bone in my body. But I want that free Palestine to be a place where we're able to bring together human beings in such a way that, yes, we would be concerned about Jewish safety and security. Nobody's calling for the annihilation of Jewish brothers and sisters, but you'll never have Jewish security. You never have Jewish safety if you don't have Palestinian security, if you don't have Palestinian safety. That's what we're talking about. We want equality. We want equality. We want equality.
So yeah, so that was Professor Cornel West, who is a renowned philosopher and theologian, standing in solidarity with Palestinians at the rally in D.C. And he made an impassioned plea for justice and dignity, drawing parallels between the struggles of Palestinians and African Americans, and calling for an end to the occupation in Gaza and a future of dignity for Palestinians. Obviously, he is still, he is running for president,
Yeah. Yep.
but I thought it was, it was important for him, important for a presidential candidate to be there, and share his thoughts. What do you think about that, Nadia?
Yeah, I mean, so he's a leader, he's a person running in this race. I was reading, I think in that article that you'd sent, according to a recent New York Times Siena College polls, 57% of Americans disapprove of how Biden is handling the
Yeah, we talked
conflict
about
with,
that last week, right? Yeah.
yep, and an even deeper divide among young voters. Um, and I think that Cornel West, kind of understands that and understands why folks are disappointed in Biden handling, this conflict, and his not really listening or capturing sentiments of folks that are feeling disappointed. So I think that he is absolutely, um, trying to get some traction in the communities of both Arab, Muslim, American Muslim, Palestinian, or just folks that are really advocating for
Yeah.
the ceasefire and so
Yeah,
forth.
let's pull up this story from ABC News that says that Cornel West is making a big push to court the Muslim and Arab American vote. He obviously was speaking at the event over the weekend, but amongst other things, holding fundraisers and whatnot. And he has a history of supporting Muslim Arab and Arab communities, and condemning the war in Gaza and urging investigations into potential war crimes. All the things that I think many Muslims have called for, definitely recently, but over the last couple decades, with starting with the war in Iraq. Um, and now that um, his entrance into the race, especially if he can sway some Arabs and Muslims, could have a huge impact, especially in places like Michigan.
So that's a question I got for you, because I know that the US Census doesn't necessarily track religion of voters. Do we know how many Muslim voters there are? And then in particular in Michigan, is that like a data source that we may have?
From the data that I know, the last election was so close in Michigan, just whatever tens of thousands of votes, and
Yeah.
so
It's
with a
always
place
been
like
a swing state,
yeah, a
right?
place
So
like
like,
Dearborn, they have Dearborn, Michigan is a hotbed for the Muslim community. Hotbed is probably the wrong word to say, but a
yeah.
big has a big Muslim population, Arab as well, in the surrounding communities, and so the idea is that if they come out in a voting block where 60, 70, 80% of them decide not to vote for Biden, then that's going to have a huge impact
Tremendous impact.
in
Because then the alternative is a Trump term, right? Like is that like if folks go out and vote for Cornell or someone else, that splits the
yeah, the
vote.
presumption is that they're not voting then for Biden, and then Trump wins.